this kind of task is fairly familiar, common when you do interviews. This is actually, a very common set of problems that you would get. And so this is what you're going to apply. So here's the challenge that, let's say you got. This is a task that you got as part of your interview. So they're saying design the dashboard of a HR management tool that will motivate the users to update their clock in and clock out status every day. The problem this organization is having is employees are coming in, they're not clocking in or clocking out, or they're not even applying for leaves. So you are basically trying to create a system, or you're trying to create a dashboard where you are trying to motivate people to update their clock in and clock out every day without fail and apply for leaves on time. This job that you're applying to is you're applying to as a designer, as an interaction designer. Your screen name it's a leave and attendance screen. That's what the screen is called, but it's a dashboard. That's pretty much the dashboard for your leave and attendance. Your end user is IT company employees. And again, this is interesting because especially if you have people that are working remotely, this becomes even more critical. Now, what you need to be focused on is ideate on various use cases related to entry of clock in and clock out, as well as leave management. So what is the output I'm expecting from you?
Any specificity as to whether it's for mobile or a desktop thing?
I don't really care. You guys figure it out. Okay, this is what the interview task says. It says that you will be successful in this task if you can create dashboard that solves my problem. Okay, all right, go ahead, Simran.
Why would a person who's going to office need to clock in and clock out by themselves? Updating status would be something that a remote work employee would only need, right? Because when you enter an office, you have to punch in somehow with biometrics or an ID card.
How many people have you seen that slide behind other people on biometrics?
I'm sorry?
So like people coast behind other people when they do biometrics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not working out. Cool. Go ahead, Achyut.
So, sir, this dashboard is for particularly the human resource team, or somehow the dashboard should motivate the employees to do the clock in and clock out this thing.
So one of the things when you're doing is when you're reading a problem statement that has been given to you, you highlight keywords. So who is this product going to impact? What is the impact that it wants? The impact is motivated users so that they update their clock in, clock out and status, leave status every day. There's two ways you can interpret it. You can interpret it as, okay, the HR guy gets the message. Now the HR guy is going to sit on top of the employees to clock in and clock out. Or the individuals will get the message and there you're motivating them directly to clock in and clock out. So you can choose either one of those solutions. However, you have to find a solution that is more workable. So if you say the HR is going to sit on top of your head and motivate you, that is not a realistic solution. So the only solution that will work here is the employees being motivated by themselves to clock in and clock out and apply for leaves. Now, this is an important skill that we are doing. It might seem like people are asking a lot of questions, they're wasting time. No. Disambiguation and learning how to read the task and understand the task is a very important skill that you need to have. So I want you to read it. And if you have any doubts in understanding or you have any questions that you want to ask the interviewer, this is the time you want to ask. Because once you complete the task and you deliver it, you may not get the outcome that you wanted.
Sir, I have another question. The problem seems to be reasonably stated, but this is kind of confusing. If we want to solve the problem, is there any specificity why they have mentioned this task is for interaction designer role?
Good question. So can anybody tell me what is the difference between an interaction designer, a visual designer, and a researcher?
So UX researchers handle the research component of the particular problem that they are doing. They would go in depth and find things out. And then the data would be taken to an interaction designer. The interaction designer will construct the skeleton of how the app would be with workflows and with sort of like beams and columns of a building, and they would like plan routes and things, user journeys, etc. for the user, think through various edge cases and errors, how to prevent errors and stuff like that. And then once it's that flow and stuff is done, the functionality aspect is done, then form is applied to it. So visual designer comes and takes that entire wireframe and they add visual design to it, which is not just colors and prettiness, but it's also like solving functionality using visuals. Like, for example, deliberately choosing blue text to indicate that something is clickable. So the user would be able to understand the product just by knowing. So that is where the visual designer would.
Thank you, Simran. If you were to look at these three different roles,
Yeah.
the way I would, as an interviewer, expect them to approach this task would be dramatically different. If it's a visual designer, they're basically, or actually, if it's an interaction designer, they're basically saying, well, what is the flow of this experience? How will we get people to do this? What is an effective way to do this? What are the possible errors that can happen? How will that affect the flow? And how am I going to compensate for all of that? That's what an interaction designer is thinking. Whereas the visual designer is thinking, are people able to understand the intention of this page? Those are all the things that a visual designer will look at. They might also say, well, do they know where they are in the whole process? That's also something that the visual designer would need to worry about. So as you can see, Achyut, every discipline has different questions and different problems they're trying to solve. And what is interesting is what Simran pointed out is a very interesting contradiction, because I just said all the interaction designer does is it doesn't look at one page, it looks at multiple, or she looks at multiple pages. At the same time, the task says focus on a dashboard, one page. There's a contradiction in the task itself. And so you have to figure out, well, as an interaction designer, how would I approach this problem? Because even if it's a beginning of a step for some other step, you still have to think about that one page. You have to think about that one page from the perspective of how all the other pages are going to be. So what we are going to do now, we are going to take 15 minutes, discuss it, and you have to think what is the artifact that you're going to give back to me. So while she's setting up the room, I'm going to talk about the artifacts. So the artifact I want is a sketch. I want a sketch of that page with the specific interactions and the things that will be on that page. Which of the teams have got the final artifact ready?
Team 1, no, sir.
Okay.
It's halfway
Gagan,
done.
did your team get the final artifact ready?
No.
So let's think about this. What went wrong? So in this case, the moderator should have said, Gagan, when you took over the moderation, you should have basically said that this is how much time we're going to ideate, this is how much time we're going to prepare. That said, how many of you jumped straight into the process, straight into giving solutions, as opposed to telling me what is the problem? What problem were you solving?
I think I jumped the gun. Reason being because of time. My idea was that I lay the foundation of a rough idea, and then we'll all scramble around, and say, look, this is not working or whatever. That was the strategy.
So here's a very interesting lesson that I got from my mentor when I was early on in my career. So when a senior person goes into a room and they have an agenda, let's say we say, should we invest in country A or not? Let's say that's a choice. You will never be able to, even if you do a 5-hour meeting, you will not be able to make a decision. If you have a personal preference, what you end up doing is you bounce your idea off some of the key people, get their sense and understanding, finalize your thought process, and you already pre-bias people towards saying whichever direction you want to go to, because you've already had those discussions. And then when you go into a meeting room, you are more likely to reach an outcome because you've had these discussions outside of this large group. So how does that relate to you? Well, if you want an answer or you want a certain direction to be taken, then you need to get the key people in your team aligned in the direction. You need to get them agree to the direction. So if I was the moderator, what I would do is I'd start the meeting and I would say, listen, we have 15 minutes to get this done. What I'm going to do is the first 5 minutes, I'm going to talk about the questions. Well, why don't people do this right now? Let's list out all the problems. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to type everybody's feedback. So sharing is important because as people are saying, it comes in and you put a stopwatch, 5 minutes, it's done. Then you say, okay, now they have to be identified. Let's very quickly vote and say out of these 5 questions, which are the 2 questions that are most important, that everybody believes. Okay, we're going to put 1 minute for voting on this. Very quickly put your vote. The moderator does not vote unless and until there's a tiebreaker. Once people have voted and you've kind of decided that this is the way it's going to be, then you say, let's take this specific problem and come up with 5 different solutions. Let's ideate as many solutions as we can for this specific problem. We have 5 minutes. Now, the last 5 minutes, you're basically saying, okay, now let's very quickly sketch it out. So what happens is even if you don't reach a final solution, you will reach some kind of a ballpark. So that is something that as a moderator, that is a skill that you have to do. And trust me, moderators have more influence in the decision making of a group than the individuals presenting their ideas. Now, for team number one, what was the idea that you came up with?
So we kind of spent a lot of time focusing on the problem, trying to kind of highlight things, why what is happening. We were ideating on quite a few things like would a gamification aspect motivate them to log in? Why are they not logging in? What are they losing out if they don't log in, log out? And then finally, from my experience of with HRM tools, if I don't log in and log out, I don't know what is my leave balance. So if I don't know my leave balance at the time of me wanting to apply, when I don't know how much leave I don't have, I can't even apply. So I thought the only motivating factor rather than gamifying the experience, or there was also a scenario that was spoken about trying to give them some online coins or something as a gamified this thing and leaves this thing is something like very
Essentially, you're saying the reason people log in or don't log in is because they're looking for some information.
yes.
And so only when you log in, you have access to that information.
Yes, or at least what
Got it.
we wanted to come out as a solution is show them their leave balance a little more emphasized way that every day if they are not logging in, their leave balance is decreasing because the system is not recognizing whether the employee is on floor or not. Because it's an absence, leave balance is going down.
Got it. So that is your solution.
Yes.
Are there any other problems that you identified?
We went to sketching, right? So our sketch is
So
not
did
that good.
you did your sketches? Did you do your sketches?
So whatever Achyut said, yeah, we tried to implement in a sketch. We were on FigJam, so that's the thing. We were unable to
Got
sketch it out each and every feature of login and logout. But yeah, that leave feature where you can see the leave as an employee, we sketched that part.
Got it. So Gagan and team, what was your outcome?
So we try to discuss about different aspects of this trigger, how it needs to be acted upon, and there are different complexities which are causing like objects like location, remote work, and all. So what we try to essentially do is how can we decentralize a dashboard and the trigger. So which is why we came up with an idea of having an OS level permissions where this trigger would be like a notification or something, a widget for Mac OS or any OS which is there. And once they have been connected to any internet, so this trigger pops up when for the first time of the day, and then they can log in using that trigger. And the rest of the workflows like application leave and all can be accessed once they have logged in their portal, because there are subsequent steps logging in, opening a browser and then logging into that URL and then accessing that trigger would kind of derail or demotivate, which is why we thought maybe this can be decentralized and then it's a widget for an OS level centric. And we also thought about one more idea so there can be two scenarios where you can start the day or maybe you're on a sick leave. So that leave kind of process can also be triggered from this notification area. So essentially this OS would have two critical actions, one primary and secondary, where they can access the trigger kind of thing. That was our idea.
Now, what is interesting is the correct answer to this would not have been the final solution in itself. What the answer would have been is like, okay, well, we looked at this. The way I would describe it is if you had this as an interview task, you would definitely have more than 15 minutes. But especially if you're doing live tasks and all that, this skill is very important. What you're doing is ideating on the spot. Okay. Where the other person keeps their camera on and you're expected to solve it within 1 hour. The way you would potentially handle this is, well, I see three problems. The first problem is people are genuinely forgetting to do it. The second problem is that people don't want to do it out of malice. The third problem is people have no incentive or struggle to do it. Right? And I'm making this up as we are speaking. So there are three different unique problems why somebody would not update their information. So if somebody just forgot to do it, the answer to that is to provide a reminder. Now, when you provide a reminder, there are two outcomes. One is they're in a place where they can see. So you are creating a compelling enough experience, or you're creating a cost for people to go check so that they know what is out there. So they log in and they see how many days of leave do I have, and accordingly they are moving forward. That's one way that you're doing. The other way is you want to give the notification where people are. So in which case you can pop up a notification. So you basically create an operating system level notification mechanism where you are providing that notification. So that's where the first solution set comes. The second solution set comes in is, well, somebody is malicious. Well, what does it mean to be malicious? Well, somebody just wants to, they don't want to tell a lie, but they also are not working. So that's a very interesting scenario. What do you do in that case? So in which case, again, you want to educate people on what you're noticing. When things are transparent, people know exactly where they stand with the system. Only when there's ambiguity within the system do people think maybe I can do this and escape out of it. So the idea of transparency is what the first team solution is, which is, listen, I'm going to be very transparent about your leaves and your half days and your salary cuts and stuff like that. That's going to show you, right? I'm also going to show you how many times you've submitted late, because the first time you submit your information late, I'm going to accept it. But the second or the third time I'm going to do this, I'm going to give you warnings. And then I'm going to constantly increase the cost of correcting a mistake. If it's a genuine mistake, that's fine. But if it's not a genuine mistake, then you have to pay additional costs. So the first time you don't have to take anybody's permission. You just say, yes, I was present. But the second time you do it, you have to go talk to your lead. The third time you do it, it has to get escalated to the HR person. The fourth time you do it, well, you don't have an option. You lose it, right? So or maybe there's some other form, but again, you're thinking about escalating cost of making that mistake from a deliberate perspective. So now that in your design, you have to communicate the transparency and the escalating cost. What was the third use case? That somebody just forgot about it. Is that right?
Yeah.
Reminder. So in which case the reminder comes in. So again, when you look at the overall solution that both of you came up with, these are the problem statements. These are the types of users that will come in. That's how I'm approaching them. Here's my sketch that provides with transparency, and here's my sketch that provides them with escalating costs. Now, when I bring these two ideas together, now I've got an interesting dashboard design. Now, when you listen to that individual, you're seeing the storytelling, you're seeing the thought process and how it's evolving, and then you're putting it together. So part of presenting your solution is also telling the story. So I would say, I think you guys have done a good job coming up with the idea. But still, the process of coming up with the idea is a little bit messy for everybody. So I would also say the process of moderating is still a little bit, nebulous. I want you to practice these moderation skills, and I want you to practice these structured skills where you're thinking, okay, well, what is the problem? Well, which problem is most important? How are we ideating? Let's come up and let's sketch. Put that time frame, and then I think as a moderator, you become stronger, and your team, I guarantee you, within 15 minutes, you will be able to come up with some interesting solution. And if you're able to do it in 15 minutes as a group, you should be able to do a 1 hour live on camera interview task. No problems.